Week 10 is here, and as always, we love to bring you our star sits of each and every week. This week, I have the wide receiver position. As always, I love to say there's still plenty of time to turn things around. Make sure you get trades, you hit the waiver wires, do whatever you have to do to get a win and make the fantasy playoffs. That's all we want to do. We want to get the ship at the end of the year. So let's get right into the video. Teams on a bye, by the way: Ravens, Bengals, Patriots, and Jets. So make sure you take those guys out of your lineup. Some good guys that are no longer available for this week. But my first start of this week is Chris Olave versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers currently give up the second most points to fantasy wide receivers. Chris Olave just had a decent game against the Baltimore Ravens. 13 fantasy points, caught 6 out of 9 targets for 71 yards. Looks like he's the only reliable wide receiver on this team. And he is playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who give up the second most points to the fantasy wide receivers. Let me remind you what AJ Brown did versus the Steelers 2 weeks ago in week 8. 6 receptions, 10 targets, 156 yards, 3 touchdowns, 39 fantasy points. Can Chris Olave get that? Who knows? Whether it's Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, it doesn't really matter. Even Taysom Hill, it doesn't matter. Chris Olave is going to eat. Michael Thomas does not return, and Jarvis Landry has been up and down, very questionable coming into each and every week. Chris Olave is the only reliable wide receiver on this team, so start him with confidence going into week 10. My second starter this week is DJ Moore against the Atlanta Falcons, which is Thursday Night Football, by the way, so keep that in mind. The Falcons currently give up the most points to the fantasy wide receiver position. DJ Moore has been doing his thing for the past couple weeks. I mean, outside of week 9, he only caught 2 out of 6 targets for 4 fantasy points. You saw the Bengals just run away with that game. Kind of felt like the Panthers gave up. But the last time DJ Moore played the Atlanta Falcons, we all remember what he did. That was kind of the dang. DJ Moore is here, right? He's back again. Caught 6 out of 11 targets and a touchdown for 152 yards, over 27 fantasy points. Can he do that again? I hope so. Once again, the Atlanta Falcons give up the most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So if you need a wide receiver, start DJ Moore with confidence. My third start wide receiver this week is Darnell Mooney, or Chase Claypool, maybe in a desperation play. Darnell Mooney plays the Detroit Lions, who give the 5th most points to the fantasy wide receivers. This is a divisional game. Obviously, Darnell Mooney has been showing up. He's having a good second half of the season, unlike the first part of the season where he was just dropping goose eggs, 1 points, 2 points. Justin Fields and this team is finding their rhythm. Even though they're losing or they have lost, Justin Fields, you're kind of seeing the emergence of him and how he can be a successful superstar quarterback. We've always believed in him. Zach and I have always been ridiculed, saying you're wrong about Justin Fields, and he's doing the things with his legs and his arms, right? Darnell Mooney this past week against Miami caught 7 out of 8 targets for 43 yards and a touchdown at 17 fantasy points. The week before, 12 fantasy points, caught all 5 of his targets for 70 yards. I think it's there, it's happening, and the chemistry is starting to build in with the addition of Chase Claypool. It's starting to open up, which is great. This is exactly what you want to see. So I'm really excited about this. By the way, the Lions just gave up over 18 fantasy points to Allen Lazard. He caught 4 out of 10 targets for 87 yards and a touchdown. I think Darnell Mooney can get this along the same pathway of what Allen Lazard did this past weekend. So start Darnell Mooney with confidence. And my fourth start wide receiver of this week is George Pickens versus the New Orleans Saints. The Saints currently give up the 9th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. And even though the Saints have been kind of shutting out the top receivers in the past couple weeks, they shut out Devontae Adams, they shut out, I guess, Devin Duvernay on Monday night, but nothing really, it's not a top wide receiver, right? But George Pickens, coming off of a goose egg game before their bye week in week 8, just had a bye week. They just traded away Chase Claypool. Kenny Pickett is a solidified starter under center. So it's George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Pat the Dragon, and Najee in the backfield. I think it's going to be, we're going to see a huge step from George Pickens in this offense coming into this season, coming into week 10, right? So once again, he didn't score any points in week 8, but what we saw against Miami, caught 6 out of 6 in a touchdown for 18 fantasy points. I think we can see that. We've seen him be very up and down, inconsistent, but if you need a wide receiver to plug and play, because of bye weeks, I think George Pickens could be the guy. So starting with confidence going into week 10. My 5th start wide receiver this week is Christian Kirk versus the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs currently give up the 8th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Kirk has been very consistent, been doing his thing. He only had 3 games under 10 fantasy points. The rest has been, 10 points or over. Very reliable guy, very good flex option at times. A mid RB2. This past week, he finished as a top 10 wide receiver. Had over 21 fantasy points, caught 8 out of 9 targets and a touchdown for, once again, over 21 fantasy points. Now he's playing the Chiefs, who currently give up the 8th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. I think this is fantastic. This is exactly what you need. The last time the Chiefs, a team with a solidified wide receiver, unlike the Titans on Sunday night, was Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk had over 15 fantasy points the time he played the Chiefs, and that was with Deebo Samuels being out. So I think you can definitely start Christian Kirk with confidence if you do need a wide receiver going into week 10. And my last wide receiver this week is Devonta Smith versus the Washington Commanders, soon to be back to the Washington football team, because I'm believing in the name change. I just like the Washington football team, always did. The Washington Commanders currently give it the 9th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Look, Devonta Smith has been disappointing the past 2 games, right? Week 8, just under 8 fantasy points. Week 9, under 4 fantasy points. What happens in those 2 games is that they ran away with that game. This is a divisional game. Not saying they're not going to win this game. Not saying they're not going to run away with this game. But hopefully they can get Devonta Smith more involved in this game. And if you do need a wide receiver with all the bye weeks happening right now, the Bengals, you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins away. You have Devonta Parker, Jacoby Myers, and you have Garrett Wilson. If you need a guy to plug and play, Devonta Smith could be that guy for you. So start him in week 10 with confidence. As always, we like to bring you our must-start wide receivers, and we have to bring you our must-sit wide receivers of this week. And my first sit wide receivers is a group, any Titans wide receivers versus the Denver Broncos. The Broncos currently give up the fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position. You tell me a wide receiver you want to start there. Treylon Burks is out. Nikiti Westbrook has been non-existent. Roberto Woods has been non-existent. There's nobody here that I want to trust. Can you trust Malik Willis? Can you trust Ryan Tannehill? The only person you can trust on this team is the King. He's doing his thing in the backfield, but that's it, right? So I am not starting any Titans wide receivers. So I will be sitting each and every one of them going into week 10. My second sit group is another group, obviously. Any Texans wide receivers against the Giants. The Giants currently give the 4th least amount of points to the wide receiver position. Brandon Cooks has been up and down with an injury. I think he wants to get cut. He doesn't want to be on this team anymore. He was hoping to get traded. Nico Collins has been injured. You're not going to start Chris Moore. You're not going to start anyone, just like the Titans. You're not going to start any of those guys. So make sure you sit all of those wide receivers. And my third sit of this week is another group, the Washington wide receivers versus the Eagles. Scary Terry's going to be there. Yes, I think he could be the guy, maybe even Curtis Samuel, but I'm not confident with this Eagles team, right? I think they're going to shut him out. This is a divisional game. They're playing, if I'm not mistaken, at home in Philly. It's going to be a tough divisional game. The Eagles currently give the 9th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So I'm just there to avoid it. I want to avoid any of those matchups, Curtis Samuel and Scary Terry. Guys, as always, these are my start and sit wide receivers of week 10. Comment down below if you have any questions. We love to answer each and every one of your questions. We'll reply to them. And also, we go live 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday to answer all your start sit questions. So good luck in week 10.
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos,
watch it.
You can also subscribe
right now
if you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/FantasyLand fam.